Okay then, let's get started. It's 11 a.m. here in the UK. So welcome to our February webinar. I'm Dermot, part of the customer success team here at Me2. And this month we're going to be discussing the problem of communicating with and effectively engaging a remote workforce. Now, I'm delighted to be joined today by somebody with a great deal of experience in this matter, Mr. Richard Taylor.
Morning.
And Richard is the CEO of Lumi, and Lumi are the world leader in shareholder meeting technology. And they've got offices in 9 countries and as such face this ongoing challenge of keeping their dispersed workforce very engaged. Now, as always, we'd really like you to connect to Me2 for this session. We're going to be running a few polls as well as hopefully taking all of your questions as part of this Q&A session that we'll have at the end. So if you haven't already, get the Me2 app. You can download it from the iOS App Store or the Android Play Store, or access the web app at web.me2.com. And when you've got the app, please go to meeting ID 160056288. Okay, we can actually see that we've got quite a few people connected via the GoToWebinar today, and not so many on Me2 just yet. So please do get onto a session. We really want to hear your questions and get your feedback. So it's really important that you get on there for us. We'll also have the joining instructions on every slide so that you're able to pick up and get started with that. Okay, so over the next 15 minutes or so, Richard's going to be discussing the problem that he faces and ways in which he's overcome those issues, and then showing some of the resulting differences that it's made to Lumi and of course his employees. So the aim of this session is to let you leave today with the bit of knowledge and the confidence to run some employee engagement meetings and look at overcoming those main challenges with having a dispersed workforce. Some of the benefits of actually implementing technology to help achieve that, and then some actionable tactics to encourage all of your employees to actually have their say. So like I said before, we're going to have Q&A at the end that Richard's agreed to stay and go through, so please get all of your questions in there. And again, you'll see Me2's instructions are down the bottom there. You can go to web.me2.com and then the meeting ID is available for you there. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Richard. But actually, no, first, that's my mistake. We've got a couple of polls actually, which is why I wanted to get you onto Me2. So if you could get your Me2 apps out, and then we'll get you to respond to these questions here. So how often does your organisation engage with their employees as a whole group? So is it less than once a month, more than once a month, or do you never actually get everybody together in a single meeting? Okay, so we've got a couple more votes coming in there, and I think we will take that poll just to get a sense of who've got in and how they do it. Okay, once a month, so very similar to our organisation. And I believe similar to the way Richard runs it as well, but more than once a month. So I'm very interested if you could pop the frequency of those meetings into our Q&A board. That would be great, so we can find out just how regularly some of you are running those sessions. And another poll: how does the leadership in your organisation actually engage with employees? So is it a one-way broadcast? Do you have two-way engagement with anonymity for your employees? Or do you have two-way engagement with employees identified? So again, just give you a couple of seconds to get in there. You can also see again the instructions for accessing Me2 down the bottom. Go to web.me2.com on any browser and enter your meeting ID 160056288. Close that. Okay, so about half using anonymity, and I guess there's potentially some people that do a mixture of the two, but what I was looking for really is to get a feel of the majority. Okay, very few people doing one-way broadcast. I think that's quite good to see. I'm quite surprised it's so low, but it is very good to see that people are actually engaging all of their employees. Okay, now I think it's a good opportunity to hand over to Richard.
Well, thank you, Dermot. So Lumi, as described, we are the world leader in the provision of technology and services for shareholder meetings and AGMs. And also, full disclosure, Lumi and Me Too used to be part of the same business until Lumi was spun out last year. But I think in terms of addressing what the key challenge for us is firstly part of our main competitive advantage, which is the fact that we are present in so many countries and generally are the main player in most of the markets in which we operate. So that's one of the our USPs, if you like, but at the same time that creates a challenge, certainly in terms of internal communication, how to maintain a common esprit de corps, if you like, across such a dispersed place. So one of the first big issues with that is time zones. So our offices spread from Minneapolis to Sydney. So as you can see, within trying to create a single meeting in a day means it's very, very early for some of the team and very, very late for others. So where possible, we've tried to do that in a single way. And you can imagine that the Paris time is the most convenient point that sits in the middle there. But where the time zones actually change with the northern and southern hemisphere. So we sometimes do one in the morning and one early, one late in order to make that work. But the key thing really around this is generally the sort of flow of information, but very much wanting to do that in a two-way way, if you like, in order not just to kind of disperse information, but to get genuine feedback over how it's being received, if it's being understood, etc. And another challenge in that is we have a sort of a wide range of staff in terms of what their skill base is and what that means in terms of some who are operationally and technically very proficient, others more on the commercial marketing sales side, others more on the finance side. So depending on what the topic is and what we're discussing is dealing with the fact that the sort of levels of understanding by definition is going to be quite different. So how do you pitch that, and how do you make sure people feel comfortable asking questions in front of their peers? And also I think as an organisation we generally genuinely try to be open and transparent. And if you say that and mean that and you want honest feedback, you've got to walk the talk, and you've got to be open to what may come back at you. So I think that's the challenge. Now, the solution. So in reality, to deal with these challenges, we do a number of things. It's quite a lot of travel by definition with the nature of what we do as a business, and use that where possible to really kind of meet with everybody. We use a range of technology. We've started using Microsoft Teams quite extensively recently, which is part of the Office 365 environment. We're all on the same Salesforce instance. We use a number of kind of online platforms for HR related things as well. But the one key part, which is where we try to bring everybody together, is a monthly meeting on the first Thursday of every month, so known as First Thursday, where we set that up as an all hands call. Sometimes at the same time, sometimes two, to deal with the issue of time zones. And the way in which we do that is a bit like this. We go to webinar together with Me Too, and it could cover anything from how we're doing financially, where we are in terms of product development or some new product release, any organizational change, things like that. And I probably do most of them, but get other people involved as well. So I think one of the first things around using GoToWebinar and Me Too is the fact that wanting it to be two-way, once you've got more than 7 or 8 people on a call, it's very hard to use audio without it becoming quite chaotic, or without having very clear rules over who can talk when and muting and so on. So I think that becomes too hard, so you end up moving towards a format like this, GoToWebinar. But then it's very one way. And I was very aware at the beginning that you're talking to a camera with very little feedback. So it's very different from talking to people live in a room and getting a sense of, is the message being understood? So that was a very important part about Me Too, to get the feedback and even just the sense that there is an audience there, that there is somebody there to actually listen to it. So
just before you move on there, Richard, sorry. Now, obviously Lumi is a technology company, and so you're probably going to be more comfortable and quicker to implement different technologies and potentially multiple technologies. Can you give any advice on how to go about choosing what platforms to use and ways to kind of make yourself more comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as with most things, it depends what you're trying to get out of it, what the environment is, and so on. Teams does seem to work well, as described, with smaller teams. Mm-hmm. It's a kind of Slack-like collaboration, but also being able to kind of speak with each other easily. I think, the way in which we, for the first Thursday, usually it's not just a sort of gathering to exchange views. There is a presentation involved. There is a message to get across, and an understanding of feedback. That we're open to the feedback that can come back from it. So, I think with all things, they're all the different technologies. They're tools to support you in what you're trying to achieve.
Okay, and then in terms of encouraging, so you mentioned that you've got lots of different types of people working in the business. So some very technical, some maybe not so. How do you encourage all those different types of people to actually embrace it from their side? Because obviously you have, but they need to as well.
One of the things I picked up earlier on was to ask a question, do a poll early on, where you're pretty which is asking, what's your level of understanding, or how comfortable are you with the topic we're about to discuss? And that poll is not really for my benefit. What I'm hoping and what I would expect is that you're going to get a low level of understanding. People saying, actually, I'm not that comfortable with this area. So the benefit of seeing that result back is actually for everybody else in the audience to see, oh, good, I'm not going to be the only one that isn't familiar with this subject. So actually, I don't mind asking a question, because I'm not going to feel like I look stupid. So sometimes you're slightly manipulating it also in a way, but it's a way of kind of helping the audience feel more united, because we often think of this as, I'm the presenter, there's the audience, and that we are two groups. But actually, certainly in our case with the first Thursday call, the audience is highly spread. So some of them will be participating remotely as well, just by themselves. Others will get together in one office around one screen, which again is where Me Too helps, because you'll have one GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar instance activated, but perhaps 5 or 6 Me Too to be able to kind of feed back. So all of that helps the audience feel more comfortable with each other, and it's part of what we're trying to achieve, which is to kind of actually make them feel like one team.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. So, I guess having implemented all of these particular solutions, and I imagine you've tweaked over time. You mentioned using, Teams, I guess Skype as well, and then settling on GoToMeeting and a bit of Me Too there. I guess the next thing to do is talk about some of achieving those goals. And the results there.
So, can you hear me? I've started doing this with every first Thursdays. Is right at the beginning, and often sometimes, particularly if I was doing an early one for the benefit of Asia and Australia, that could be 5-6 a.m. for me. So I'd do it from home, winter, dark outside, laptop, microphone, and the first thing I sort of say is, look, can you hear me? Is anybody there? Because for my benefit to know that there is actually somebody on the other side listening to it, and that immediately triggers the yes, we can hear you, all well, and it makes it easier for my sake. Then generally we then go through a number of polls that are the same each time. So firstly, where's everybody from, both from a geographic perspective, which office, but also which part of the business. And again, that's for the benefit really of everyone to have a sense of who else is in this virtual room. We also ask a few questions which we try to track from meeting to meeting, from month to month. So, on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel about the business from a personal perspective? then the same question again from a business strategy perspective, so that you get not just for that meeting, but to see how that evolves, over the months we do it. I use the before and after questions quite a lot in terms of to be able to see actually levels of understanding, particularly if there's been a question of how much do you understand at the beginning, how much do you understand at the end, or what's your view on something, what do you think about it, what do you think at the end, to sort of actually see if the presentation or the slot itself has been worthwhile. As discussed, asking a question to make others feel more comfortable about asking the stupid question, because actually it probably isn't a stupid question. The other thing I actually thought a lot about is when to use anonymous and when to use identified, and actually a switch depending on what the topic is. If you really want to be honest and say really want to know what you all think, often that's better done anonymously, because you're more likely to get the honest answer than if it's identified. I think more when we're getting people to kind of give points of view and keen that people can stand behind that, then more towards the identified. But switching between the two, definitely. And the final thing, which is sort of building on something I said earlier, but is this sense of creating a sense of unity in the audience. So if you've got 50, 60 people who might be spread across 25, 30 locations, how do you make them feel part of the same team and the same audience in the same meeting? And whereas when we were first kind of using the Q&A and the messaging, we very much felt like it was from audience to presenter and presenter to kind of give back. What we found is that the sort of message board functionality of it creates quite a sort of peer-to-peer communication as well. So some questions started being answered by other people, or in times when, particularly under anonymity, where there may have been something said that somebody didn't agree with, or may even have started to take an offensive tone, others would chip in and ask that person to calm it down, or put them back in their place. So that it creates a kind of momentum of its own.
Yeah, that self-moderation, I think that would kind of put a lot of people at ease. There's a few questions about anonymity, but I guess that is probably people's major fear about using anonymity for their employees, is that somebody's going to post something challenging or worse, disruptive.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that, and what did you do in that situation?
I mean, it's quite a scary thing to do at times, because you are opening that possibility up, and also as an employer you've got a sort of duty of care to not kind of facilitate that kind of behaviour. Generally, we've never really seen that. I've been sort of surprised by how responsible it is, and also by people generally take the responsibility of the fact that we're trying to get genuinely good and relevant feedback, but done in a respectful way, and people generally respond to that accordingly. But the only time I've ever really sensed it, which was when it was bordering on the offensive, and certainly somebody really hiding behind anonymity because they were able to do it. As I said, it sort of self-regulated itself. Other people on the message board were suggesting that this is out of order, and they should put it back. So
do you go through any housekeeping at the start, or kind of just trying to help set the tone by telling people what you expect from them in terms of that?
I mean, I think, look, a lot of this will depend on what the meeting content is. Is it something, just an update, something really quite controversial or difficult from an organisational perspective? So I think when that's the case, usually kind of say, look, we've got our own standards and our own ideas about what's acceptable behaviour. Please respect that. And, generally people, in my experience, do. Yeah.
I guess we could probably move to some Q&A.
Yeah.
If that's good for you, Richard. So move on. So I'm just going to take some questions from our Q&A board here, and please continue to send your questions in for Richard. So we'll just, I think we start from the bottom. Stephen has got a good question
really good
here, and he's got 5 likes, so we should definitely take that.
So firstly, I would say the likes is very helpful when you are managing your own questions when you're presenting as you're going along. I often do that just to kind of see what's the most popular and order it in that way. Mm-hmm. But related to what you've asked there, in our organisation, English is not the first language of quite a lot of our team, even though we run this in English. So what we've found is that submitting text-based questions, mm-hmm. a lot of people for whom English is not their first language are more comfortable with that than they would be actually raising their hand and speaking in the room. And so that's quite a useful way of doing this. But in terms of, look, there are different nationalities, slightly different cultures about how comfortable they are in terms of asking questions or how challenging they're prepared to be. So there are differences. But I generally, and our business is very spread across North America, Europe and Asia and Australia, and it's there isn't a part of the world for us that doesn't engage with this.
Okay, so thanks for that. Ed has asked another question. So he said, do you moderate your Q&A? And I'd like to add a little bit to that as well. So do you moderate your Q&A? And if you do you do it yourself, or do you ask somebody else to moderate for you?
I don't. I mean, I think on the basis that I quite like the message board side of this that creates the kind of peer-to-peer answering of questions and communication, which if it was moderated, that would kind of kill it. However, our organisation is about 70 people. Generally, we will get 50 to 80% attending these meetings, to do with time zones, to do with people who are have got other work-related things they need to do. So a reason to moderate because of the content, because of the volume of questions is not really relevant for us. My feeling is up to about 200, you don't need to moderate for that reason. Yeah. But look, in part of what we do, moderation's key for the type of other types of meetings. But in this sense, with what we're trying to achieve, we don't.
Yeah. I mean, in our experience, we've seen some Me2 customers actually, having 2 or 3 people moderating, where they've got really large numbers of people, that are working for them and joining these broadcasts. Actually, one person just can't moderate it quick enough. So another tactic is also to open the Q&A potentially before the meeting. I don't know if you ever do that. Yeah. But it would help generate some content beforehand. Yeah. Is that something you've tried?
Yes. And, you get some of that, but generally we find it all really happens during the meeting. People, as people join it.
Okay. Dave's asked a question about people being trialled. I think you've already kind of covered off that yes, it is a fear, but actually it's never become too much of a problem. Matthew, again, has got a good question here. Do you prefer employees being anonymous or identified, and what are the benefits or the risk of either? I mean...
Yeah, as discussed, I think it depends what you're trying to achieve. I think there is if you're concerned people would not ask the questions that you would want to hear if they were identified, then anonymity is... It's just more honest, definitely. But I think there is also a time where people need to be able to take the responsibility of standing behind their points of view. So having both options works.
The right one for the type of meeting. So Sarah Reed has got a good question here and has got quite a few likes as well. So what do you do with the polling data? Is it used for any post-meeting reports? Have you seen any trends in employee engagement since you started doing this?
So we record the meeting, we record the GoToWebinar, and we take the reports of the polling data and the messages, and we publish them on our intranet on SharePoint. So we have an archive, if you like, of how these things have evolved. So again, we're very, very open. With
everybody in the organisation has access to all of those afterwards.
Yeah.
That is very transparent. Yeah. Rebecca's got a question here. So, can you explain the before and after question and how this is set up? And to avoid going into a bit of a tutorial, I'll just answer that one quickly. It's basically, as Richard mentioned in his example, if you ask the same poll multiple times, you can then use Me2's PowerPoint add-in to actually compare those results, so you can kind of see a live shift either in opinion or in learning.
Yeah. So I do it on the slide. So if there's one at the beginning, the slide, and then you repeat the same question at the end, and it has its results, and then there is a revealed slide that compares the two. So it's quite easy to do.
Cool. Stephen again, would you recommend for large town hall meetings, so it's put 5,000 plus, so would you recommend, I guess, doing it for this, and how would you manage the Q&A participation? Gets an extra note here. Can be a lot of questions to answer and go through. How would you manage that in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I've never done anything that big, so but I would imagine in that kind of scenario, I would probably look to have some help, because the way in which I do it at the moment is I'll have the screen, the camera, and an iPad with the questions coming in and dealing with it. But I think at that stage you probably would want moderation, just because of the kind of sheer volume, and moderation with somebody helping you, taking, like you're doing now, taking the questions and saying, this is something you should address. Yeah.
Sarah's asked, are they truly anonymous or just masked from the meeting participants? So it is truly anonymous.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't know, we don't know. So and they don't know who each other are as well. So it's completely.
I think it's about the kind of culture of an organisation. But if there is a sense that people think you're trying to trick them, then you've got a bigger problem. I mean, the reason for anonymity is genuine, in terms of you really want to hear what people really think, without which you're concerned you might not get it. So if you want to really say you're open to honest feedback, then you've got to be so.
So Matthew's got a good question. It hasn't got many likes, but I think it's quite good. How do you make sure your meetings are not repetitive? So if you're doing a monthly meeting, I guess there are certain things that you'll check through every time, won't there? Do you save up certain things to actually bring in, or how do you make them not repetitive?
Well, you should probably ask some of the people that listen to them rather than me, but because perhaps they are. But I think generally we cover a different range of topics, from whether that's performance, financial updates, product releases, trying to get other people to run them. So some are much more genuinely looking for feedback, others are perhaps more informative in terms of this is what we're doing, for you to be aware. But I think again that's probably less to do with the tools and more to do with the presenter.
Rebecca's got a good one here. What's the most valuable question or type of question you found engages your employees and brings them together in a virtual meeting? So I guess that's the key one there, isn't it? It's bringing that group together, like you mentioned before.
And again, just by doing this, you learn a little bit about this over time. But I found the kind of creating a scale question. So rather than a yes, no, don't know, or a scale question where you sort of look on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is very bad and 5 is very good, or how do you feel about this? And then you might ask the question, how do you feel about X from a personal perspective, from the business's perspective, from something in a range of different ways, and then you get a more nuanced feedback in terms of what people really think, and whether is it closer to the sort of 3 average with a bit of 4, or is it predominantly 5 with a little bit of 4? You get that's in my experience that's quite useful.
Yeah, cool. And then there's a couple more left here, and we are certainly on the edge of time. Stephen again, what's the best and worst thing that's happened due to having a two-way meeting during a town hall? It's a tough one.
I think the best thing that's happened is when, I can't remember what it was, but some update, some news, some change that I was genuinely concerned about how people would respond to it, and how they would, whether or not they would embrace it or not. Whether they liked it, but whether they'd embrace it, and actually, because if they don't, it's hard to see it execute. And I got much more of a positive reaction to it than I'd anticipated. And so I know without this, I just wouldn't have known that, and probably would have behaved differently afterwards, suspecting it was worse than it was. I think that was probably one of the most useful. And probably the worst was a sense of, with some of the, under anonymity, a concern that somebody was bordering on the being offensive, but we were facilitating that, and at what point you would step in to add moderation or so on. But as I said, in that example, actually others stepped in to do that. But I suppose that was a kind of concern that you think, well, being very open, but you also have to be a responsible employer.
Lovely. Okay, thanks so much, Richard. We are very much out of time. If any more questions come in, hopefully you'll help us respond to those and push them out to people. Amy has asked a question, and it looks like somebody's responded to in terms of our lovely animated GIF that's on the home screen. You can create them yourself, and we've hopefully got some instructions on how to do that. We will certainly get them out. Feedback, we've just opened the survey on the Me Too app, so please do give us your feedback. It's really, really useful for us to keep improving these sessions. So just hit the little icon that you can see highlighted on the slide there, and answer some of the questions for us. Also, just a quick promotion before we close up. We run these webinars very often. We've got an update to Me Too that's happening next week. So we've got an exciting new question type coming in, which is a star rating slider scale. So we'll be talking about that. Myself and the product manager will be running a webinar next week. On Monday, I believe, to actually go through some of that stuff. And then there's our other webinars as well, and I will post the link to that webpage out afterwards. And last but no means least, please rate us on Trustpilot. They're very useful to help other people understand Me Too, how you're using it, and what you think of it, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Richard, thank you very much for joining today.
Thank you.
It's been really useful, and we've got some great questions in there, so thank you all very much as well. Take care.